Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chris and I buy records. It is Sunday the 5th of November 2023. It is Bonfire Night tonight, although most of the celebrations for Bonfire Night happened yesterday. I went to a firework display yesterday. It was pretty good. Yeah, liked it. Bonfire Night is one of those things that I think is really important. It celebrates a culturally significant part of English history, but it's been overshadowed quite a lot by Halloween of recent times. But I, like to attend firework displays when I can. It's good. It's good stuff. So although I buy records, it's worth noting that I am primarily a music fan. That goes without saying for a lot of us, doesn't it? We love music. That's why we collect records. It's not because of the artifacts or anything like that. Blah blah blah. But you know what? Sometimes I wish that I didn't. So this week saw the arrival of the new Beatles single Now and Then, which I didn't want to listen to initially. I've got very strong feelings about the Beatles lasting up until 1970 or 1969, I suppose, with their recording days. Although I am, nostalgic for the tracks from the 90s to a certain extent. I was, 14, 15 when they came out. I didn't really know a lot about anything. Free as a Bird, never really liked that, even though that's probably the stronger one of the two. But Real Love, I've got a real soft spot for, to the extent that it was actually played at my wedding, albeit in John Lennon's demo form. So you all know that the single has been done using Peter Jackson's, whatever he calls it, of being able to isolate certain parts of tracks, and then AI is used to fill in the gaps, blah 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 blah. That's not where my issue with the song lies at all. I think that when I listened to it, the thing that really stood out was the fact that John's vocal was really quite clear and not too bad, especially because he used to use a lot of processing on his voice back to kind of the mid-60s. He famously didn't particularly like the sound of his voice and was always trying to mess with it. My main issues with the song are, firstly, that Paul and Ringo are just absolutely dialing it in. There's no sense of kind of fun or bounce or any of those things that make the Beatles, even when they're going through their pit of misery and kind of, the studio tracks of Let It Be and certain of the kind of the filler tracks of the White Album. There's just nothing of that there. But mostly it's because, and let's be fair, it's a piss poor song. It really is. It's John's kind of mid to late 70s era of babysitting, well, not babysitting because it was, but basically looking after Sean, sitting at a piano and writing a ditty. And it just so happened that this was the tape that they got. I mean, for heaven's sake, this was the one that was meant to be on the Beatles Anthology 3 that they just cut off, allegedly because the tape was too poor. Also allegedly because George Harrison just hated the song. Although that's been masked now by saying, oh no, he didn't actually hate the song. What he hated was the condition of the song. George Harrison in 1995 was one of the most miserable men on the planet. All he wanted to do was play slide guitar with the Travelling fucking Wilburys. Just a dreadful song. Now, I went back and I watched the music video. I thought, maybe the music video, because I know that Free as a Bird in 1995 I wasn't massively keen on, but then went back and watched the video, and actually it was this really beautiful thing of this bird flying around the streets of Liverpool and the Beatles at certain points in stock footage, really, really nice. This is a fucking shit show. It really is. It's kind of got Paul and Ringo looking like they're on a day out from the fucking care home, being given some studio time, intercut with superimposed clips of John and George in the kind of, I mean, it's all over, but the ones that stick out to me is kind of the kind of Hello Goodbye type era, possibly Magical Mystery Tour. It's just awful. Paul and Ringo don't just look like they don't want to be there. They look like they don't know what's going on. You know, I can barely hear Paul's vocal in it. His bass line is crap. Ringo's drums are so processed that you just can't make anything out. The strings, admittedly, are kind of nice, but the dynamic range on the song, if you actually look at a spectrograph of the song, it's fucking level. It's kind of What's the Story, Morning Glory levels of compression. There's no dynamic range to it at all. This is the bloody Beatles. You know, this is a band who made their career from dynamic range. Even the bloody 2009 reissues, you know, they're not perfect by any stretch, but they've got peaks and troughs. No, it really bothered me. To quite a large extent, and there's a video made by a brilliant YouTuber called Andy Edwards, who is a drummer who plays predominantly prog rock and jazz, but he's also just does these long form music sort of criticism videos, and they're excellent. He's got such insight and knowledge into what he talks about, and he makes a very good point that this isn't a song by the band The Beatles. This is a song by the brand The Beatles. And that to me is such like a depressing thing, that the Beatles, who are undoubtedly the most important band that there ever was, both musically and culturally, you know, they're absolute untouchable titans in this regard. You can argue all you want about whoever your favourites are, to say that, well, the Beatles were average musicians, they relied a lot on studio trickery and all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. No, the Beatles are legendary for a reason. Yeah, not all their output is perfect. In fact, a lot of it is mediocre. But when they shine brighter than anything that transcends being a subjective favourite. You know, you've literally got music before the Beatles, you've got music after the Beatles. But the Beatles were four guys plus George Martin who created that. This is not that. This is the Beatles by committee. This is the Beatles. This is Jeff Lynne's The Beatles. This is the Universal Music Group's Beatles. And it's just not on, as far as I'm concerned. I've read many things about people who like the song. They pick up really good things about it. Yeah, you know, people are entitled to their own opinions. But I don't know, a lot of that is because it's the Beatles, and there is a consensus that the Beatles are this like untouchable entity that you can't possibly critique in any meaningful way. But I've listened to the song a few times. I never ever want to hear it again. It is dreadful. Now, if you're going to do a kind of a comeback, if you like, or if you're going to do it, then this is what you do. You do the Beatles, you do the Monkees' Good Times. This is fucking brilliant. 2016, I think this was released. Yeah, 2016. So what they've done with this record is they've got the three of the original. So this was made before the sad deaths of Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork, after the death of Davy Jones. And what they've done is they've got some contemporary songwriters to write in the style of the Monkees. They've got some older tracks. The song Good Times is a thing with Harry Nilsson. Harry Nilsson's on it because it's a sort of an old demo track or whatever. But things like You Bring the Summer, In Our Own World, Me and Magdalena, they're things that are done contemporarily. I mean, You Bring the Summer is Andy Partridge from XTC. I mean, how can you not love that? It's a love letter to this band. This is how you keep a musical legacy alive. Now, the Monkees back in, the mid-80s, early 90s, something like that, had an album that had the single Heart and Soul, which I love for all the wrong reasons. I love it because how awful it is and how banal it is. But even that I would listen to in preference to Now and Then by the Beatles. So yeah, this is how you do a sort of a celebration. Not by using AI and trying to make out that it's like a really pious thing. Have some fun with it. Make it a little bit parody. Yeah? Crack on that way. So that was my take on the Beatles. I didn't actually want to talk about it. I just felt compelled to because it actually upset me. It actually upset me. I had a social care governance meeting with the management team yesterday. I've actually put it on the agenda to talk about because it upset me so much. But no one cared. No one really understood or was interested, and it was me mansplaining mercilessly, which I acknowledge, but I had to get off my chest to someone. And I didn't have time to make this video then. So there you go. So elsewhere in kind of record buying still slowed down. Cost of living is ridiculous. Price of records is ridiculous. I went into HMV to kill time, not wanting to buy anything, but just to kill time. And it's apparent that records that I was buying 8-10 years ago for 15 quid are now routinely selling for 30. I understand that production costs have gone up, and I suppose the rate of inflation and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, twice the price for new records really hammers home kind of a situation that we have within record buying. It's becoming really obvious that the quality of those presses is just decreasing, and it's. I have long been a defender of record pressing plants, and I normally acknowledge that being a physical media, being that there is always going to be that physical defect. It's something that's prone to that. If I'm buying a lossless audio FLAC or something like that, then that is going to be flawless. That's the whole point of it. But I'm buying something where the music is on indentation of grooves on on a piece of vinyl. Therefore, I do expect to a certain extent there to be little defects like pops and cracks and a little bit of dust and dirt on the disc, and to a certain extent a little bit of warping. But just lately, I mean, the new records I'm buying, I am surprised if I get a perfectly flat record. And I don't really understand why. I don't know if they're rushing them out. I mean, I always talk about how in its peak, the EMI plant at Hayes in Middlesex was knocking out 125,000 records a day. If you get any of those Beatles records that have been presumably played to death, they're all flat as pancakes. They all sound, not bad. They've had 60 years worth of wear on them, but they do genuinely sound pretty good. So I'm not too sure. But it made me think, is part of the reason, in a small degree, the reason why record pricing has certainly gone up is because people like me are buying things like this. So I bought this this week. I had to really convince my wife into buying it for me because I work in health and social care, so therefore I'm broke. I have an almost flawless original pressing of Miles Davis in a Silent Way, an original US pressing. I was very, very lucky to find it. The cover is shocking, but the disc itself is incredible. Really, really, really good sounding. But I'd heard such amazing things about this mobile fidelity in a Silent Way that I felt compelled that I just needed to have it. This is likely my favourite album ever. This is something I will not grow bored of. I mean, one of the absolute joys of buying this was that I got to A/B compare them, so I just got to listen to the album twice in a row, which was, brilliant. The pressing itself is interesting. This is transferred digitally from DSD-64. I don't care a monkey's cuss about that. It's all about dynamics. It's all about how it sounds. I don't care where it's from. There are elements of this record which outweigh my original. There's slightly more life and separation in the keys. I picked up a lot more call and response between John McLaughlin's guitar and Herbie's keys and that kind of thing. There's kind of the bass is of a slightly more rounded frequency that sits a little bit better in the mix. So generally speaking, I think that this is probably the preferred copy, especially because this is now back in print. You can pick this up. I don't know what the US price is. I paid a shade under 60 quid for this, and it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed good time. Whereas if you're buying an original press, then you're at the mercy of people's grading and honesty and all that kind of thing. But the original pressing, to me, this is an album which is all about John McLaughlin's guitar and obviously Miles' trumpet and Wayne Shorter's sax. Let's not downplay that. On the original pressing, there is a kind of grittiness and a kind of, I can't describe it, but it's something that sounds phenomenal. This has it, but not to the extent of the original. So this isn't that kind, for me, this isn't that runaway, this is so much better. Wow, I didn't realise what I was hearing. Mingus Sahum, on the other hand, I have an original press of that, and then I got the Mobile Fidelity one step. That was night and day. That was like being in the studio. That was that kind of level's good. This isn't. This is still amazing, because I think that the original 360 label, sort of Columbia, they are brilliantly pressed records. There was a lot of flaws with the original Columbia pressings in the 60s. They'd managed to sort it out largely by the time of In a Silent Way, and it sounded great to my ears. So this is kind of, this is good. Maybe if I had a much more elite system, maybe it'd sound different. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah, this is worth having. I'm glad this is back in print. I enjoy owning it. I will probably use it as my go-to over the original, simply because of preservation of older records. I want to keep it nice, but I am glad I own them both. But another thing that I want to talk about is the kind of the impetus and the reasoning for buying records and buying things. As I said at the top of this video, I'm ostensibly a music fan. So therefore, why am I spending a huge chunk of my record buying budget on something which, let's be honest, I already own? It's already in the racks. Now, this was echoed. I went to Slide Record Shop in Bedford, which is fast becoming my favourite record shop, simply because it's a very well curated and very well laid out record shop. It's always quite quiet in there. The staff in there aren't overly chatty. So that's good for me. Sometimes I do like to engage, especially with people I know. If I go to Vinyl Underground in Northampton, I always have a chat to Matt and Adi when I'm in there, because that's part of that. I know them. But sometimes you just want to have your own space and time around you, flicking through racks without someone coming up to you and saying, "Oh, have you heard that? That's really good." Sometimes you just want to discover things on your own. They have an amazing jazz, funk, soul, global and hip hop section. Now that's very much where my wheelhouse is at the moment. So I was in there, and they had a lot of Ian Carr's Nucleus reissues from Be With, which I love. I own most of them. There's a couple I don't own. So I went through there. They had a few Tone Post, they had a few classic vinyl series, they had a couple of the Impulse series, they had a number of the BBE J-Jazz series, which I'm really behind on. So it was kind of, do I go for that? Flicking through the other things, they had Mama's Gun by Erykah Badu, which is a record that I is well on my list that I kind of need. They didn't have a copy of Operation Doomsday by MF Doom, which is something that I very much want, so that might have swayed it. But what they did have is something I've never ever heard of and never seen before, which was this, which is a compilation album from the South African soul and funk band The Movers. So this is a collection of songs of theirs from 1970 to 1976. So South Africa, deep in the midst of apartheid. Obviously, these guys would not have been treated very well by the society in which they lived. But I saw this. And I was continuing to look, and this was just the thing I kept thinking about. This was the thing that I kept coming back to. So literally after about 40 minutes of being in there and going through every permutation of budget and what I wanted, and going back to the certain sections and flicking through. I don't know if anyone else does this, but kind of you go through just in case you've missed something you've always wanted. Because obviously you're not going to see that the first time, are you? You're not going to see that there's a copy of something that's been on your wish list for the past God knows how long. But in the end, I got this because, to me, looking at that, and look, there's no information on the back. It's just a track listing. No information on the back whatsoever. And just based on that, I thought that is impossible to be a bad record. So I bought it, got it home, and it's an absolute joy, as I knew it would be. So I suppose my take home from all this is, let's not get bogged down in the familiar. Let's not get bogged down in just buying a load of copies of the same record. Let's not get too nostalgic about bands that were great in the 60s and stuff like that. Let's get into things we've never heard. Let's get into taking a risk. Let's judge books by their covers. And let's just do the things which drive us on, which open our exposure, that give us more of an insight into this wonderful world of music. And it is a world. It's not just jazz. It's not just pop. It's not just rock. It's not just the UK. It's not just the US. It's not just Europe. Anywhere where they make music, which, let's be honest, is anywhere, has music out there that we will desperately need to hear to give us enriched lives. And if there's something to take from this video, that's it. This is a great record. I'm not saying go and buy this, but I'm saying next time you're in the record store, have a look. See what's there. See what you've not heard of. See what grabs your attention. Take a chance. My name's Chris and I buy records. I'll see you on the next one.